Gonna hit. Okay, great. So I am so excited to talk to you today, and I'd love to get started, Steph, just by talking a little bit about your own early postpartum experiences and your background. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you had support or what your early postpartum looked like with each of your kids.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking and thank you for connecting with me about this. I would say they were vastly different. So, with my first experience, you're a new mom, so everything is new. And I was one of the first out of my friend group to be pregnant. I got married early, we had babies earlier. And so I didn't have a whole lot to compare or figure out. And this was before I really got into social media and followed a bunch of moms and kind of saw the realistic motherhood that thankfully is now out there. So I was kind of in the dark with a lot of things. And my mom didn't really talk about her pregnancy experiences. She had a mom who was kind of cruel in the way where she said that I didn't really want you as a child. And so we know from that transgenerational pattern that happens of like you kind of absorb what your mom experienced during her pregnancy and what her mom did. So I kind of went into my first experience blindsided by what it was going to be. Combine that with the fact that I was a military spouse and had moved during my second trimester to a brand new area where I didn't know anybody. And we thought we were doing the right thing by moving close to like the beach and like a really pretty area and a nice house away from the military community. But that ended up being probably one of the worst decisions that we did because I was pregnant and postpartum in an area that had a lot of money, was older, there weren't little kids around. So I truly was doing a lot of this by myself. And that's very a sharp contrast to my second postpartum, which I'll talk about in a second. So, when we think about like the risk factors for postpartum depression and anxiety and depletion, it comes down to like, do you have a good social support system? Do you feel safe? Are you being nurtured? Are you being mothered while you're mothering? And I wasn't. So my mom did come and she supported me for about 3 weeks. And Lizzie, I remember dropping her off at the airport after that 3 week mark in tears, saying, I can't do this. I can't do this. You can't leave. I have nobody. Like, I'm scared. I'm navigating postpartum anxiety. I don't know that I am, but I'm experiencing this. And it was one of those things where it was like, oh, she did the best she could. She was like, you'll be okay. Like, we all go through it. We're all moms. But it was like a serious, like, I can't do this. And it went on to have me navigate postpartum anxiety for about a year before I woke up and realized, oh, this isn't normal. And I think what happens is there's so many things that happen in the postpartum experience where it could be from one angle looked at as like, oh, that's normal. That's new parent worries. You're tired. Of course, your hair is falling out because of hormones. Yeah, you lost weight because you're nursing and that's what it is. But we need to look at it from a different perspective as well too, and really get critical. So that first, in a nutshell, that first postpartum experience was really hard on me. It was hard on my marriage. It was hard on my mental health, my physical health. And when I woke up to what happened from that point, it was like, oh, I need to do something about this so nobody feels what I felt like. So, with those tools, with that knowledge, with that understanding, I went on to have a second postpartum experience where I kind of knew what could happen in that second postpartum. I knew how important it was to have my community. I knew how important it was to not take the answer of this is normal, this is common, all moms go through it. And I knew how important it was to really invest in myself and put my own oxygen mask on first and listen to my inner wisdom versus listen to what other people were telling me I should do or what books were telling me I should do. So I had a beautiful postpartum experience with my second. And I think seeing those sharp contrasts of what it could be like and what it's like when you don't have that knowledge and support really drives my passion for helping other moms.
Oh my God, that's such a beautiful story, and also one that comes from so much
Yeah.
challenge, and you were able to really make a shift that way. And it sounds like you did a lot of preparation for the second postpartum, whereas the
Yeah.
first one, it was more just like rolling with things, probably getting settled in a new house, looking at all these other areas, and then being like, oh my God, what's happening?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
So,
it really was. It really was. It was. So with my first, I didn't have a doula because I was of the mindset that I've got my husband, I've got my midwives, I should be fine. And I had two home births. And what's really interesting about home births, which I don't know that I really understood going into it, is you have your baby at home and the midwives will stay with you for a few hours after you have your baby at home, but then they leave. And so it's different from being in a hospital where you're there for maybe 24, 48 hours, maybe more. And you kind of, I wouldn't say you get the rhythm of it or figure it out by any means, but like you have that 2 days or so with people. You're figuring out the nursing thing. You have people who are like monitoring baby's weight, which could be a good or a bad thing. But at home, they're gone. And so it's really like a shift. And so I planned differently in that second postpartum experience, knowing that it really that support falls off the planet after you have the home birth. And so I had meals all ready to be delivered in my freezer. I had more people in my community. I connected with more people, even though I moved again in my second trimester for my second pregnancy. I really connected with the people in my area. I had a lactation consultant that I loved on speed dial way before I needed her, which I didn't with my first. And I chose the least expensive, but like the most painful person to work with. So definitely like find somebody you resonate with in all levels. And I really was honest about what I was feeling and what I needed more so than the first. So, what support was different? I gathered my community. I was not afraid to ask for help. I delegated tasks that needed to be done way ahead of time. I hired that postpartum doula, invested money into that postpartum experience. I asked for postpartum gifts instead of baby gifts. And I let good enough be good enough a lot more than during my first postpartum.
oh my God, that literally sounds like a total 180-degree difference. And I love that you asked for the postpartum gifts, or that you prepared for the postpartum doula, which is for the
Yeah.
mom, and recognizing that you needed that. Oh,
Yeah,
that's so
it's
deeply
it's
important.
so interesting too because we think about pregnancy and postpartum and how much we spend on our weddings and preparing for that event and like dishing out money for a beautiful cake. And then when it comes to postpartum, it's like, make sure baby's taken care of, but we don't think about what we necessarily need. And so absolutely, I think it's so important. The other thing I think that changed dramatically that I don't want to forget is my nutrition. And so, with that postpartum anxiety, I couldn't eat. I was so nervous and anxious that I really didn't have an appetite. And the struggle with that is not eating or not having balanced meals really sets the tone for blood sugar roller coaster all day that feeds the anxiety further and doesn't let you sleep, doesn't let you calm down, doesn't let you really enjoy or be present to what's going on. And it's interesting that people would come up to me and they're like, oh my gosh, you look amazing, you bounced back, like all of this stuff. And I was like, well, thanks, but it's because I'm seriously super anxious and I can't eat. And so it's something that I want to say because we can't compare what someone looks like or how they're dealing with it or our perception of them on social media with the reality of the situation. Because from the outside, it looked like, wow, she must be doing great because she's doing all of this to cover up the pain and the anxiety. But inside, I was a mess. So, with that second postpartum, not navigating that anxiety, I was actually able to eat balanced meals and regulate my blood sugar, nourish my body well, and that just continued to fuel the presence that I felt and the beauty that I experienced in postpartum.
It's incredible. With the meals the second time around, were
Mhm.
those kind of meal trained? Did you make things in third trimester? Did your doula help you with food stuff? Like, where did your
Yeah.
food come from? And did you
Yeah.
use more directing, or was it just more whatever was brought?
Yeah. So this is something that I share with my clients too, because you don't want to have to be worrying about what's for dinner as you're worrying about how is this baby nursing? How is my body healing? How can I go to the bathroom without feeling uncomfortable? Like there's so much to juggle. So I think it can come from a mixture of things. So the meal train for sure is so important. And this is something that I feel like reducing the shame of like asking for it yourself. So I have some moms that are like, nobody set up a meal train for me. And I'm like, sorry, like I really wish people would see that for you and do that for you. And you can do it for yourself. It's free. I mean, people want to support you, but they don't really know how. And oftentimes, how it shows up that they want to help you is like, I'll hold your baby. When it's like, no, like feed me, like I need food. So set it up for yourself. Say what your preferences are for food. If you want to be dairy free or gluten free or whatever, vegan, put that on there so that they know it's not a burden to people. So meal trains were one, setting them up for when you need them. So for example, if you know that you're going to have help the first 2 or 3 weeks, start that meal train at that fourth week, because you might have that taken care of on your own, and you don't want that support to just like drop off the cliff at 3 or 4 weeks either.
Right.
So meal trains, I think prepping as you go in that third trimester can be really helpful too. People do this different ways. So I have some clients and friends that will do a meal prep party. They'll have a couple of friends come over. They'll all create these freezer meals so they can stock their freezer, and that feels good to them. It's fun. It's a way to interact. It's productive, and then it's not all on them. Or you could just do a little bit as you go. So let's say you're having uh, a super stew for dinner, maybe double or triple that and put the extras into your freezer. And if you do that every night, you're just going to be loading up that freezer with storage. Then finding ways to simplify. So there is no shame in doing frozen vegetables, doing things in the Instant Pot from frozen, doing meal delivery services for a short period of time. I think if you have the budget for it, allowing that, feeling abundance in supporting yourself versus, oh, I shouldn't have to do that, or it's expensive. It's such a short period of time, and it makes such a difference in your bonding and your ability to heal if you don't have that community that's close to you. And then, yeah, postpartum doula, the beauty of a postpartum doula is they can do whatever you want them to. And people don't even know that postpartum doulas exist sometimes. They think it's just for labor and delivery. So knowing that it is available. And then their job is to mother the mother. So that could look like sitting on the couch with you so you have an ear to talk about what's going on. It could be them throwing the laundry in for you if you feel comfortable with that. It could be them watching your toddler so you can heal and work with your baby. It could be, making meals for you. So that is one option. And
What
if
did
you ask for money for your postpartum gifts instead of baby gifts that you probably don't need, you'll have that in reserve.
Yes. What did your doula do for you specifically that was so supportive for your recovery?
Honestly, she sat with me. She sat with me and talked me through what I experienced and the difference between the two, like how I was feeling now and how I felt in the postpartum period, which was so healing. And that's something I talked to my moms about, is the importance of therapy. It could be with a therapist, it could be with your doula. But if you had a really traumatic first birth or first postpartum, you don't want to carry that with you into that next experience. And not that you're ever going to fully be able to let that go, but finding ways to work through it so you can travel through that next experience without all the stories and weight. Because I was scared. I didn't know what it was going to be like. I assumed it was going to be as traumatic as the first one.
Mm.
So she sat with me a lot and helped me work through that. She also encouraged me to do things that my midwives in the first postpartum told me not to do, which one of them was exercise. And this is something so interesting because we talk about that 40-day rest period. And I think that can be absolutely needed and healing and for the right people and the right context. But for me, I took that very literally of laying in my bed for 40 days. I was like, I'm a rule follower. If you say this is what's needed, okay, I'll do it. And for somebody that is an athlete that really has an identity in working out and exercising and being strong, that really was hard for me. So she encouraged me to go. We went on walks together. She talked to me about work and how I can move through that. She, of course, played with my kids. But for me, it was just having somebody that got what I was going through and could keep me in a good mental space during the times where it got hard.
Oh, that is such a gift. And what you're sharing is exactly what a lot of the data says. Postpartum
Yeah.
doulas, kind of
Yeah.
as these Glenda the Good Witch fairy godmothers are, is
Yeah.
that emotional support. And it's something that I don't know if you feel the same way, but there's a difference when there's a professional relationship where
Yeah.
like she's been, she's being compensated to
Yeah.
be there and hold space for you. It's different than your friend comes over and maybe you share or you vent for a bit, but then you're like, and how are you? Because you feel like you need to, and all you
Yes.
want to do is just like cry.
Uh-huh. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's so true. It's so true because yeah, you don't, it's almost like you know your friends will be there for you and listen to you. At least I hope you have people in your corner that do. But then you do feel like you need to give back. And with a doula, I didn't really feel like that. Like she would scratch my back or like massage my back. And I was like, oh, thank you. And I didn't feel like I had to like return the favor and do it for her too. So yeah, that is beautiful.
Yeah. Transitioning back to the nutrition part, I'm
Yeah.
curious, both from your personal experience, but also from your work with your clients, can
Mhm.
you speak to the unique nutritional needs of the early postpartum period?
Yes. So, gosh, it's so interesting that we're still not in a place where this is understood and talked about and discussed. My mind is blown that maybe in during pregnancy, maybe we're talked about folic acid or avoiding deli meat and alcohol. And then postpartum, when we maybe have gone through a major abdominal surgery, we are nursing a human, we are physically recovering from blood loss, we are in micro and macro energetic debt from literally birthing a human and creating a human, that we don't even get a nutrition. Most people, I would say, don't get any talk about nutrition during that 6-week visit.
Yeah.
So, why is it so important? Let's say you had, no matter what kind of birth you had, you are recovering from a energetically, um, you're recovering from a process where your body had to move through this energetically demanding state. You may have a wound the size of a dinner plate in your uterus from where that placenta was. You are not only trying to recover your body, but you are nursing and feeding another human. And so when we think about what that looks like, we have the nutritional depletion that may have happened before you even got pregnant in that preconception period. You were on birth control pill, you were maybe on a diet or really restricting for whatever reason. Maybe you weren't classified as like a healthy eater, or you weren't taking any kind of supplements. So you have that energetic depletion. Then you've got the pregnancy, which baby will take whatever baby needs to grow and heal at the expense of you. And I have some moms that during that first trimester, they can't eat very well at all. And they struggle. Maybe they have hyperemesis. They can't get anything down. Maybe they weren't able to take a multivitamin to really fill in the gaps that's there. So in the postpartum period, why nutrition is so important is because you are filling those gaps and repleting the deficiencies that have happened even since before you conceive that baby. And without that support, what I see happening is symptoms magnifying, symptoms that may be normal in the postpartum period amplified to an extreme. So one example would be, okay, you had a cesarean section and now your wound is not healing and we're having more infections than what you normally would. Maybe you have some hair loss that's happening, but it's coming out now in chunks versus just the normal loss that happens because you built up extra hair during pregnancy. Maybe it's you feel tired, like you would normally feel tired when you get out of bed because you didn't sleep very well, but you can't physically get yourself out of bed now because you're so energetically depleted. I also see it in cases where, moms just have this mental fog and they forget there's this forgetfulness there that is common, as our brain is shifting and it's more dedicated to caretaking versus, memory and all those kind of things. There are some brain shifts, but it's where you're putting your keys in your refrigerator. And this is happening all the time. You forget names, you forget important things, and it's concerning to you. It's not funny anymore. It's concerning. So without thinking about what is going on with your nutritional stores and repairing them, you're going to feel like you're walking up a mountain carrying a boulder versus, walking up that mountain without a boulder, but being pretty fit after having a baby. It's hard, but it's going to be harder. So as far as where you go from there, I mean, one of the first and easiest, most practical steps is don't stop your vitamin and mineral supplementation. That supplement plan that you were on to nourish yourself and feed the baby at the same time is something that you want to continue. And I say this not because food's not important, but it's because soil quality isn't quite what it used to be, and we're not getting the nutrients that we could have back in the day. We're not eating kale salads and salmon and beautifully balanced meals every day as moms. It's so hard to sometimes even sit down to get a meal. So we need to kind of fill in those gaps. We need more nutrients than when we were pregnant if we're nursing. When we're looking at wound healing, as a dietitian, if I am working in a clinical setting and somebody has a wound, we give them a prescription for increased calories, increased protein, increased zinc, increased vitamin C to support wound healing. Moms aren't given that information after they have a C-section. So we need to think about that. We also want to think about how we can support inflammation, keeping inflammation levels low so we can reduce swelling and puffiness and support mental health. So there's so many things that nutrition can support us with in that postpartum period. And I'm sure you want to dive deep into like one or all of those. So I'll stop there, but I just think it's so underrepresented and it doesn't have to be hard. I think that's like the ticket is like, you don't have to eat perfect or have it be all or nothing to nourish ourselves well postpartum.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. And the analogy you just shared of kind of going from being in like a hole to then walking up this hill and
Yeah.
knowing that we're going into postpartum likely already depleted, and then the
Yeah.
postpartum nutritional needs are higher from what I've read than at any other point in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at most we're
Absolutely.
just told like make sure you stay hydrated and like try to eat, but beyond that, there's actual things that can help to actually accelerate or support recovery, and certain foods that we can eat or certain nutrients that we can get that will alleviate the exacerbation, as you said, of symptoms. So, in the spirit of keeping it simple, what would you say the most important nutrients are that a woman or a person in early postpartum would benefit from kind of focusing on?
Yeah. So I would say one of the first nutrients that we want to think about is iron. A lot of women are anemic or iron deficient during their pregnancy. And that's why a lot of women, not all, need to take an iron supplement during pregnancy. And then we go into a period where we have maybe hemorrhaging during labor and delivery. We have continued blood loss even after that delivery for maybe up to 6 weeks, maybe longer, maybe shorter. And maybe we're not eating red meat or iron rich foods. And so iron would be one that I would really focus on, because we know that iron is so important for energy, for mental clarity. We're getting oxygen throughout our body. It's important because it's delivered through breast milk to baby to make sure you have enough. And it's linked with mental health as well. So if we have low iron, mental health suffers. So iron would be one that I would look at. And a lot of people are worried about iron or concerned about taking iron supplements because they have this association between, oh, I did that before and I got so constipated. And additional constipation is the last thing that we want after a baby, because that first poop can be terrifying. You just don't want to contract those muscles down there. And so iron in the form of iron bisglycinate is really helpful. Usually I recommend 15 to 30 milligrams of iron every other day, depending on needs. So I would say that's important. If you can get it through food, animal products, red meat, chicken, poultry, those are going to be the best sources of iron that are bioavailable. I would say omega-3s are so important, because I don't know about the women that you work with, but most women that I work with, they aren't eating fatty fish 2 or 3 times a week. And so we need to make sure we're getting those essential fatty acids, not only for our own brain, but also making sure our baby is getting some through our breast milk if we are nursing. And baby's very greedy with their need for omega-3s during that 3rd trimester. So if we're not putting it in our body and we're giving it away, it's a recipe for depletion. This is another nutrient that moms, when I'm looking at levels of their omega-3 status, almost always low, unless they've been consistently taking an omega-3. So again, we're going in depleted, we're getting even more depleted, we need to replete that. So fish oil supplementation.
Is that also linked with mental health, the omega?
You bet.
Okay.
You bet. Yep. So omega-3 is correlated with mental health, not just postpartum, but in general. So I usually recommend about 1 gram, sometimes up to 2 grams of omega-3. So more than what's typically recommended, at 300, 400 milligrams of DHA. So that's one thing. If you can get fatty fish, that would be great. So I think about it in the acronym SMASH. So sardines, mackerel, anchovies, salmon, and herring tend to be lower mercury and higher in omega-3.
So those are also all very conveniently canned, which
yes,
you can get very affordably. And I love that. It's a good acronym. Thank you. I've never heard that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be expensive too. I love the canned option because maybe other family members don't eat salmon, or maybe the smell of cooking fish isn't something that you love. And so that's really convenient as well. And there are some great brands. So Wild Planet is one, Safe Catch is one. They test for mercury. They just are really high quality and still relatively inexpensive. And you're getting like 1 gram of EPA in that too. And DHA. So iron, omega-3. Then I would say a general B complex is really important if you're not taking your prenatal. So the easiest would be take a prenatal supplement, like I talked about, to kind of fill in the gaps and bridge the gaps, because you're not going to be checking for your micronutrients for everything every day, or maybe not eating perfectly every day. So a prenatal multivitamin, there's a lot of good brands out there. Needed is one that I really like. Fullwell is another one that I like. We Natal is another newer one that's pretty good too. And what you're getting there is comprehensive support in those B vitamins, like I talked about. B vitamins are another nutrient that is implicated in mental health. It's also important for energy and metabolism and focus. So it helps your body actually use carbohydrates and proteins and fats that you're eating and turns that into energy. And we know B12 is so important for mood and memory and focus and energy. That's why you might have heard of people doing B12 shots or supplements to help support that. And that's a nutrient that is secreted through breast milk to baby. And if baby doesn't get enough, baby suffers. So we need to make sure we're repleting with that. It is in animal products as well. And so you can get some there, but I find that even with intaking animal products, it's not quite enough to really lead to improvements in a lot of symptoms that my clients are experiencing. So additional B12 in the form of a supplement can be really helpful.
That.
Yeah.
Sorry, because I've been trying to like look at the research of how to support. This is a little bit of an offset, but it's linked with early
Yeah.
postpartum. I've been looking at the link between the liver and the health of the liver with
Yeah.
flushing of all the excess hormones that are now leaving the
Yes.
body, especially in the wake of the placenta being birthed. Would
Yeah.
the B vitamin also, in your opinion, be supportive of like the hormone rebalancing that's happening?
It
Or
can. Yeah. So if your liver is clogged up, if it's not able to really detoxify and eliminate and process what's going on, then you will have a hormone buildup. And this is something that not just in the postpartum period, but looking at the early pregnancy. So individuals that I work with that have a lot of nausea and morning sickness, one thing that I look at is their liver health, because there could be, with that increased hormone shift happening during pregnancy that happens really quickly, there could also be some backup and buildup and more estrogen just causing that nausea. So I think two big things is like looking at liver health and feeding the gut when it comes to how you're processing hormones and feeling your best. So yeah, B vitamins do a whole range of things, and liver health is one of them.
okay, that's amazing. Okay, so
Yeah.
kind of top nutrients you're looking at are looking at the B vitamins, looking at
Mhm.
omega threes, looking at iron. Is there
Oh,
any?
there's so many more. I'll leave, maybe we'll just finish up with two.
Perfect.
Magnesium. I could talk about all of them because they're so important. Magnesium is one that, again, I mean, 80+% of people are deficient in magnesium. And so when I see low levels of magnesium, this could be somebody who is having restless leg syndrome at night, is having a hard time with bowel movements, is having a hard time relaxing, is having a hard time with focus, is just having a hard time recovering in general. So magnesium is one, there's a bunch of different forms that fit different needs. So if you're early postpartum, I have all my moms in that early postpartum period on a magnesium citrate supplement. And that's going to help them have easy poops right away postpartum. So they're not having to strain or be afraid of what that first experience is going to be like. And we need to be pooping daily. I mean, once a day at least for most people, to get rid of those extra hormones like you're talking about that can lead to just increased exacerbated symptoms. Just to clear the body. I mean, we're processing, we're creating free radicals, we're digesting and breaking things down. We need to eliminate them to feel our best. So magnesium citrate, if you're somebody that struggles with bowel movements, of course fiber, but from a supplement perspective, magnesium citrate. And then magnesium glycinate is one of the better absorbed forms of magnesium. That would be a great one to do. I like to aim for it around bedtime because it can help with sleep. And then you're getting your magnesium in. So magnesium glycinate. If an individual is navigating a lot of brain fog or mental health, I'll throw in a magnesium threonate supplement because that form crosses the blood-brain barrier and can help with brain health and neurological health. So a lot to kind of remember, but magnesium, you can get one that has like all those forms in it to make it easier if that's your jam. But magnesium is one. And if I had to think of one more, I would probably say zinc. Because we know that there can be some exacerbated zinc and copper imbalances in that postpartum period. And so estrogen holds on to copper during pregnancy. And what should happen is after postpartum, the drop in estrogen should signal a drop in copper and get you back down into a more balanced ratio of zinc and copper. That doesn't always happen. And in women that I work with that are experiencing postpartum mood disorders or depletion, there tends to be increased copper levels. When it comes to zinc, we're not getting a ton through our diet. We're not doing shellfish or, sometimes people are avoiding red meat and animal products these days, even more so than ever. So we're running low in zinc. Plus, we're navigating cold and flu season and viruses, and that your body fighting off those viruses depletes zinc even further. So zinc is one that I highly recommend. You can get blood testing done to kind of see if you need it. But if copper is elevated, a lot of the irritability, the mood shifts, the kind of ragey feeling, is going to be hard for you to overcome on your own. You don't want it to take a ton of willpower. We want it to just kind of come naturally and flow through you. So zinc would be, I guess, if I had to pick the last one, would be the last one.
Oh my God, I love your background and how you're able to connect these dots with nutrition and mental health. It's just, I mean, it's
Thank you.
incredible. Oh my gosh. And linked with kind of what you're sharing. So, in a lot of the research I've done, traditions around the world have kind of shared properties of types of foods that are commonly given to new mothers. And
Yeah.
specifically, I've been calling them mother-centered cultures. I don't know if that actually is the right term, but it's
Yeah. I
cultures that
love it.
acknowledge early postpartum and cultures that believe in the importance of mothering the mother and honoring the mother, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of the foods that are typically served are very liquid rich, like
Mm.
soupy, slow cooked stews, porridges, a lot of grain based foods, a lot of bone broth involved, so more animal protein, a mix, some using more spices like turmerics and others maybe doing more bland foods. But nutritionally, based on what you're sharing, how does that make sense? Does that question make sense?
Oh yeah, it absolutely makes sense. And it's really interesting that there is some differences, but overall the theme is what you're talking about. It really does. When those kind of diets were created, there might not have been the PubMed articles that they pulled from to figure it out. So it's really cool to kind of see intuitively that's what they started serving and came up with. So when you talk about, like, let's say broths, for example, what are you doing? You're refueling that hydration piece because we have a lot of fluid loss. Mom may be nursing and kind of shuttling fluids out through her. But it also is paired with electrolytes. So we're putting salt in the broth. We're getting those minerals from the bones and in different vegetables that's in the broth. And that's repleting electrolytes, which is so important. I see moms with kind of like we were talking about, leg cramps or just body cramps or aches, or, even with nursing, if we don't have sufficient electrolytes, we're going to feel depleted. And I also see it improving breast milk supply in some individuals. So the broth part makes a lot of sense. We're getting that calcium from the bones to support our bones. So broth is a fantastic food. It's also very easy to digest. So in clients that I work with that have significant GI complications, one of the best foods and only foods that they can tolerate is our broths. And so we start with that as a base. So it makes sense. Like, you're resting the gut because the priority is healing the rest of the body and healing the tissues. The priority isn't really digestion. We don't want to shuttle our energy there. We need to shuttle it elsewhere. So broth makes sense. Those meaty, like the cuts that are on the bone with a lot of cartilage, that makes sense because those are rich in glycine and proline, which are two amino acids that help our body build and repair our tissues, our collagen. And so we stretched, we tore, we need to kind of heal that tissue. So they have amino acids in protein and the specific amino acids to heal and repair. So that makes a lot of sense. They're also rich in the nutrients we just talked about, which iron and zinc. If we're having fish soup, I mean, we're getting those omega-3s, and it feels good in our body. When we think about the most cozy, comforting foods that we can just eat slowly and just feel like we're taken care of, it's those warm foods. I mean, we can talk about smoothies and like their application another day, but like if I'm drinking a smoothie, it's usually because I'm running or busy or like trying to do multiple things and drink a smoothie. But if I have a big bowl of soup, it's forcing me to slow down and rest and eat it slowly and thoughtfully. And it just feels like a hug, like in a bowl. So that's like why I think that food is important. What else? So the spices, so turmeric is really important for reducing inflammation. I also give turmeric to individuals where if they're struggling with depressive symptoms, we know that there's a link there. So turmeric can be really great to help your body reset. Ginger is great for digestion. Cinnamon helps with blood sugar regulation. So a lot of these just have so many properties of things that we need to heal. So it makes a lot of sense.
Thank you for explaining it as such. I remember throughout my postpartum when my mother-in-law would make me a soup, I'd be like, "Why did you add goji berries to this?" And she'd be like, "Good for the eyes." But like that's just, what her mom has told her, and it sounds so like, I don't know, folklore, but actually there is, you look at the nutritional composition of the minerals in the goji berry and then how that connects with brain health as you were saying, and it's like, "Oh, wow, this actually all makes a lot of sense."
Yeah, it does. It does. And really getting in whatever you can in that postpartum period is going to be good. I mean, you need to fuel your body, but if you can highlight these foods where we know it's like multitasking, like you're essentially multitasking by eating and healing at the same time.
I love that. I love that. And then it sounds like a lot of the foods as well are helping with blood sugar regulation because
Mhm.
high, good quality fats, good quality protein. Can you speak to, and this is something obviously you're an expert in, the importance of blood sugar regulation for overall health, hormonal health, mental health during the early postpartum time?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, sometimes this is what I start with first before I even get into what specific foods we're going to be eating. So, the reason for that is if we are in a state where our blood sugar is hopping up and down all day, the ability to make thoughtful and informed decisions about what we eat is really hard. If you've ever been at that point where you're hangry, you're not like, oh, a bone broth based soup sounds really good right now. You're like, give me the chips, give me the ice cream, give me the cookie. Don't even bother with that
High
stuff. I don't have
five.
time to make it. Like, I need food now.
Yeah.
And so it's been so interesting through my program and working with moms that sometimes the most effective first step for them outside of like taking their supplements is having enough protein in the morning. The reason why that is because you're setting up a hormonal stage for the day that is going to support more smooth blood sugar. If you ever thought about maybe a day where you had a donut for breakfast or a bagel or pancakes, yes, it's just one meal in the grand scheme of things, but then it's like, what do you want for lunch? You're like, oh, like a sandwich would be good, like, or a bagel or something like that, where it's really high energy, quickly absorbed. And then you're just kind of on that for the rest of the day. I had a mom who she came to me experiencing postpartum rage is what she was saying. She's like, I just can't stand my family before noon. I don't know what it is. It's a busy morning. I just am not happy. I'm yelling, I'm snapping. And we really took a step back and said, okay, well, what's going on in that time before noon? Because she said right around noon, a light would turn on and she would feel like herself again and happy. And what was happening is that she was skipping breakfast because there was so much stuff going on. She was taking bites of her little one's breakfast leftovers, which were cereal or toast. And then she was getting to a point where she was shaky. She was hangry. She couldn't control her emotions or her thoughts. And she felt so guilty for that. She thought that she was a horrible mom. She thought that she couldn't handle it, that it was so hard. Why is it so hard for me? And the second that we took a step back and said, but you're not eating breakfast, you're going over 14 hours and not feeling your body, yes, like you're going so low in blood sugar that it's your body reacting to that physiological state. So putting in a solid breakfast for her changed the game. She was ready to go on antidepressants. She was ready to just beat herself up continually about this for a long time before she realized that importance. So starting your day with 20 ounces or 20 grams or 30 grams of protein can be a game changer. And when we think about blood sugar regulation, people think, well, that means I can never have fun foods, or I like to have that donut every now and then. And it's not to say that you can't, but it's thinking about, okay, if I'm going to go out for a donut, I'm going to have maybe like some eggs with that donut, or I'm going to have half of that donut and really be intentional about like, do I want the whole thing, or am I just eating it to eat it? So it's never about restricting in my eyes. It's just really understanding how foods make you feel and designing some structure around that. So there are studies linking high blood sugar and blood sugar dysregulation and mood changes, specifically anxiety, irritability, depression in some cases. It's very clear. And I see that through working with my clients just subjectively, but also through using CGMs. So those are tools that I will use with some moms where they notice around 2 or 3 p.m., a lot of us feel this like energy dip. And often it's due to the lunch that we had. That was bites of our kids' leftovers, kind of walking through and like taking little bites because you don't have time to sit down for a meal. You're feeling bad because your blood sugar is low. It's not because you're bad or you're doing a horrible job or you're a bad mother. So really being able to like, sometimes it makes sense in our head, like, oh yeah, I should probably have a more balanced lunch. But seeing it on the CGM and that the line going down and then mood just being awful right here, it's like, okay, yeah, this does make sense. So all that to say, blood sugar regulation is so important. It's the first thing that we talk about as far as nutrition in my postpartum reset program and clients. And it could be as simple as thinking about starting your day with 20 to 30 grams of protein.
Oh, I love that. And in the early postpartum, I think about all the tracking I did for my baby, right? Like how many diapers,
Yes,
what was the
yes.
weight, and like what
Yeah.
was I looking at for me? I love the idea of giving some data and
Yeah.
then also just making these small tweaks in the same way when like the baby's colicky, you're not throwing everything out the window. You're like, I'm going to try this new burping method. And so too, if you're feeling that blood sugar spike, it's like, I'm gonna someone I spoke to was saying add clothing to my carbohydrates. So no naked
Yeah,
carbohydrates.
no
No
naked.
donate
Yep.
on the own, add the eggs. And yeah, that's so powerful. And it kind of links to another question I have, and I want to be respectful of time. Is it about
I'm
five
good.
or so more minutes okay
Yeah.
for us to speak?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, beautiful. Thank you. So, one thing I've noticed is that when it comes to nutrition, some of my clients, a lot of the women I've interviewed who've been trying to kind of manage things on their own, feel a sense of like, no matter what I do, it's not enough, it's not good
Mhm.
enough. And I intentionally named the book Mama Eats First because how many people do you know that are eating the leftovers from their kids, eating bites of toast and then feeling hangry later? And it's like, okay, let's be intentional with feeding ourselves, oxygen mask on ourselves first.
Yeah.
How do we shift nutrition and thinking about food and postpartum from like another thing to think about, another thing to stress about, another thing that we're failing at, to
Mhm.
something that can be empowering and supportive?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would first start by saying we need to rethink some of the rules we have in our head or stories we have in our head around food.
Mm,
And I say this because oftentimes I get a mom who's like, I want to eat healthy, but like, I just don't have the time to create healthy meals, or I want to eat healthy, but I like all of these foods. And we think in terms of black or white, that like I'm either a healthy eater or I'm not a healthy eater, or I can only have protein and vegetables, or I can have the foods that I love. And it's about
lost you. Steph? Oh.
Um,
Okay, we're back.
Okay, so yeah, so a lot of times it's this all or nothing type of situation. And there are a couple things that I say. One, don't overcomplicate it. Really, when we think about postpartum nutrition, it's about making sure we're getting enough protein, healthy fats, carbohydrates, and vegetables. And we still have room for the foods that we enjoy. So, a good example of this is maybe somebody brings over a meal to you and it's like a casserole dish or something like that. I want you to eat it. Like, people are gifting you food, it's nourishing, it is, the food is so much more than the individual components of it. It's the fact that it was made with love and that you're getting the nutrition regardless. So don't think that it has to be perfect, even if it doesn't fit like your ideal healthy situation or a healthy meal. I think finding shortcuts is so important too. So I talked about the frozen meals, I talked about meal delivery services, I talk about my ingredient meal situation a lot as well. And the reason that I talk about ingredient meal, which what an ingredient meal is like putting together pretty much already prepared foods and not stressing about having a recipe or having this elaborate meal. It is usually 5 ingredients or less thrown together quickly. And I developed that because I've never seen myself as a recipe person. It is hard for me to think through what I'm going to have every day for dinner. I've got picky eaters. I maybe don't want the thing that I plan for Wednesday on Wednesday. And so thinking about, okay, what kind of vegetables do we have in our house? What kind of protein do I see that's on sale or that I can thaw? What kind of fun condiment can I pair with it? And these days, the options are endless. Like, I remember 5 or 10 years ago, like finding a healthy dressing at the grocery store was really hard. Or, we didn't have groceries that were able to be delivered. And so thinking about just how can I piece together something that I like that will serve me is important. Soups and stews, we talked about as really nourishing meals. Those are probably the easiest things that we can create for ourselves and our families, because you throw everything in a pressure cooker or you throw everything in a slow cooker and you call it good. We can use one-handed meals to help us. So a lot of times I talk about, having I remember eating a beef stick in like one hand and like nursing with the other one. Like, I was like, I'm getting my nutrition in whether or not it's easy for me. I remember bananas and like putting a smear of nut butter on it and eating it with one hand. Or there are healthier protein bar options that are out there. Like, if you have a busy morning and you can't sit down to a breakfast, like, you can find things that can bridge the gap between when you can actually sit down to have that healthier meal. Not that it's a replacement necessarily, but that it can help you keep your blood sugar stable and fueled. What other things do I talk about? I think letting go of an expectation that it should look a certain way or that you should have it all figured out. And so if you're somebody who really likes having beautiful meals on the table every night, and that's something that you're used to or your partner's used to, having a conversation, an authentic conversation with yourself that like things are going to be different for a little bit, because that might not be what actually is able to happen every night. And how can we be okay with what I call being a good enough mother in a lot of areas of our life, including our nutrition, our what we put in our we serve. So simplifying it, having meals delivered to us, groceries delivered to us, lowering the bar of what we think we need to do, finding shortcuts, one-handed meals. I mean, I could go on, but like, where are you? Are those working?
This
Are
is
those working for you?
awesome. This is
Okay.
awesome. And I also, as you were just talking now about saying, maybe I'm going to tell my husband that I'm not going to have the dinner as normal. It's also maybe even telling him this is stressful for me. So I need
Yeah.
to be reminded that I'm doing a good job when things do look different.
Yes, yes.
Oh, I
I
love
know
that.
it is so interesting, the conversations I have with moms about this internal struggle from wanting to keep things the same before baby happened and what can actually happen and what can happen in a way that preserves your mental capacity and energy as well. And we have such a hard time asking for help. And so maybe it's having that conversation about dinner is going to look a little bit differently. Or maybe it's a conversation about actually, can you take on dinner? Or can you do the cleanup, because doing both is a lot for me? Or at one point I was like, I don't have the brain capacity to think through what we eat. Like, can you just write down a grocery list and I'll go and I'll make it, but like, I don't, that one piece just needs to be taken off my plate. So yeah, it's figuring out kind of what your new balance is going to be and being okay with it, not making it mean that you can't handle it or you're not doing a good job or everybody else is. And I like to give the comparison. Like, I have so many friends that are food bloggers. Like, they love to create recipes. They love to take pictures of recipes. They love to share fun recipes. And they're doing chicken thighs in the oven and warmed up green beans from a can a couple nights a week too. Like, there's nobody that's out there that's making this elaborate meal unless they really want to and they have support to help them. But we're all just figuring it out, and it changes per season. We did a podcast interview where, this was a couple of years ago, Ilana had one my podcast host had one child, I had two, and we were talking about our meal planning and preparation strategy. And I was like, I wing it a lot of times. It's like throwing together what I have, or it's like, I don't care if this doesn't taste very good, like, it's what I have capacity to do right now.
Yeah.
And it was like a nightly basis. I would like walk into the refrigerator and I'm like, like, we have that and that and that will work. And she was a meal prepper. She did this meal prep Monday thing where she hired a nanny and she did all of her meals within a couple of hours on a Monday night, and that worked for her. And it was cool to kind of see, like, we aren't making each other wrong or feeling like it's not enough. We're just dealing with what works. And she, now after having a second and third child, she's rethinking how she wants to do meals, and she's kind of going the simpler way because it's just a natural progression. And so much of motherhood is taking a step back and seeing what is happening in the grand scheme of things, and not missing the forest for the trees type of thing, not like being so focused on what it used to be and forgetting that things have changed and being okay with it. I talk about this upgrade that we have as moms. It's not a downgrade, it's
I
an
love that.
expansion of our identity. And so how can we lean into that? We have more abundance and we're richly scheduled, not busy, and we have these beautiful opportunities that are presented us now versus challenges. So a lot of it's like mindset reframe.
Yeah, it sounds like you're infusing a lot of gratitude into
Yeah.
kind of the lens and looking at what's here now, not like the way things worked, the rules that I had, the associations or assumptions, and just it's like the beginner's mindset. And it's cool because our babies are a reflection of that. Everything is new for them. So we can kind of
Mhm.
take note from them in some ways too.
Yeah. And sometimes, it's a lot of times we talk about gratitude and mindset, and sometimes, it could be the first step for people is starting with that gratitude list and starting with those mindset shifts and like really working on it. But sometimes I find that that's too hard to get to when you are really in the thick of it, when you are really struggling. Go back to that hangry example. Like, when you're hangry, you're not like, oh, I'm so grateful that I have a fridge full of food. You're like, I need food now. So
Give me a
sometimes,
burrito.
yes. So sometimes we have to kind of work on how can we work on rebalancing before we almost expect ourselves to get into this like blissful state of calm, because without really working on some of the dysregulation that's happening or the depletion that's happening, your brain is going to be prioritizing, I need help, like get me out of this state. And then once you're out of that state, maybe some of those practices are going to be easier. So I say that just because there's some moms that I work with that are like, God, like I want to be grateful, but I'm just not grateful for anything right now. Or like I want to meditate, but like there's a billion things that need to happen and blah, 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 blah. And their brains are so busy. And sometimes we need to replete before we can get there.
That's such an amazing reminder and a perfect way to wrap up this conversation because yeah, it's so in line with what we've kind of talked about, the theme of motherhood, of like kind of step by step in some ways, and not losing the forest and the trees, and not saying like I have to be at this place at this time, or my body needs to look this way this time. It's like I need to like recover so I can like return to this homeostasis, and then from there expand beyond that.
Yeah.
So I really love that. It's just, yeah, it's kind of all comes down to expectations.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting though that we have that in other areas of our life. Like when we're thinking about like fitness is a good example. We don't say, I'm going to go to the gym and then have a really perky booty the next day, or I'm going to go to the gym and then be able to lift as much as this person that's been here for 2 years. It's okay, I'm going to start with a 5-pound weights. Okay, those are starting to feel easy. I'm going to add this next level. Okay, that's starting to feel easy. I'm going to go to this level. Oh, wait, now I'm sick with COVID for 2 weeks. Now I'm going to have to kind of restart back at that 10-pound level, right? It's just this constant ping pong of like, okay, this is working, this isn't. Okay, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. Because once we set that expectation of it should be like this, I should be further along, it should be easier for me, that is so destructive, and it takes you away from the beauty that's right in front of you. And so thinking about just a little bit at a time, I talk about these 1% wins with my clients, where sometimes they'll come back to me and say, I didn't really do anything this week, I didn't have a great week. And then we look at what they accomplished and they're like, oh yeah, I did that, or I saw things a different way. So it's so important to take it one step at a time. And I say lead with like compassion and confidence that you got this.
So beautifully said. Oh, Steph, thank you so much. I feel like I could just talk to you for hours. You are just a wealth of wisdom, and you
Yeah.
are so eloquent and so graceful in the way that you show up. And I really appreciate all that you've shared today. I really have learned so much, and I just continue to look forward to following you and your program. And when I get to my third trimester, getting connected with some of the moms you work with, and being part of your community even further. So thank
Oh,
you.
I love that. Yeah, thank you for having me on, and thank you for creating this book that's so needed to help fill that gap of that information, knowledge, and depletion that moms have. So appreciate all the work that you're doing. I know writing a book is a labor of love, so appreciate you.
I so resonated with everything you said about the creation of Postpartum Reset on your podcast interview with your co-host, Dr. Alana, like, or Lena, like how there's no time, there's no space, but it has to happen. It needs to be created. And so I just was like, oh, you are amazing for creating all that you have amidst all that you're already doing. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And it's also a reminder. It's like, I think about, there's like that analogy ties into motherhood. It's like, I don't have time to like fill out these 10 pages of this kid's school form as I'm making dinner, as there's like a breakdown happening in the other room, but somehow you manage to get it done. But also that can't come at the expense of, and like understanding that all that had to get done, and you need to replete too. So it's like, we are so strong, we are so capable, we are super moms, we all are. And super moms need to recharge. Like we are always thinking about, I need to plug my phone back in tonight before bed, but we're not like, oh, I need to give back to me tomorrow because I did all of that yesterday. So kind of putting that into perspective too. So as you're writing your book, I hope you're doing that for yourself as well.